sit-in discussion with Mr. Suparna Pathak as the moderator and Mr. Ajit Menon, CEO, PGIM Asset Management Company. Topic for the discussion is behavioral finance. A small introduction from Mr. Suparna Pathak. Mr. Suparna Pathak is a well-known scribe and pioneer in structured business journalism in Bengal. A proficient writer in both English and Bengali, he specializes in government finance and governance. Formerly trained in economics and business policy, he has been a popular presence at Chambers of Commerce sessions on post-budget analysis. Suparna left his job to start a career in communication consultancy and freelance writer. He retains his column and heads a corporate communication and advisory startup called Content Crankers. Please invite Mr. Suparna Pathak on stage and a round of applause for him, please. As I said, we now have the sit-in discussion with Mr. Suparna Pathak and Mr. Ajit Menon. May I give a small introduction about Mr. Ajit Menon? Mr. Ajit Menon is the Chief Executive Officer of PGIM India Asset Management Private Limited. As CEO, Mr. Menon oversees all aspects of the asset management business, including mutual fund and portfolio management services. An industry veteran, Mr. Menon has over 2 decades of leadership experience in business strategy, distribution, sales, and marketing. He joined PGIM India from Tata Asset Management Company, where he was head of strategy. Prior to Tata AMC, Mr. Menon spent over 15 years with DSP BlackRock, where he played a key role in the growth of business. He is associated with key industry bodies and is a sought-after speaker at various domestic forums and conferences. May I invite Mr. Ajit Menon on stage and a round of applause for him, please. And Mr.
Yep. I must say that I am totally unabashed about quoting from your surveys, and which are very powerful surveys, and I use them. Although, I may not be using your conclusions, but those figures are very important. So thank you, Ajit. The major problem that the Indian economy right now is facing, we have been talking about demographic dividend and all that. But a major crisis is looming for the people who have just retired or have retired without pension. And they're facing a major crisis right now. If you look at the inflation rate on the medical front, it's more than 14 to 15%, which is huge. Pre-COVID, if some people were buying medicine, 9,400 rupees, that entire cost has gone up to more than 15,000 right now. So, and then again, the vegetable prices and other things, and it's a major crisis point. So you have done a study on this. So what are the key takeaways of that study, if you can please enlighten them?
Sure. Firstly, thank you for that very kind introduction, and Shubhana Varsho to everybody. Thank you for inviting me here, and I think this is a subject, or the subject of retirement has been a bit of a passion for me for a few years. One, because India doesn't have so-called social security as is in the Western world, and so people do struggle as far as this aspect is concerned. And I think when I go back to the survey, and we are one of the only asset managers who have done a survey around people's readiness for retirement in India. We did the first one in 2019 and released the report in 20, but that was the pandemic year. So we've done a second one for which we'll probably release a report in 2 months' time. I think some of the insights that we had from that survey, because what we were surveying for is really looking at people's readiness for retirement and preparedness for retirement. What we found is that in the previous survey, it was about 49% of Indians that we surveyed said that they felt somewhat prepared for retirement, which meant that 51% just didn't feel prepared for retirement. The other insight that we had is that somehow for a large segment of people, retirement per se is a negative connotation. Mentally, it's a negative connotation. The visual that comes up when we say retirement is, of taking your grandchildren to school and back, or having some medical issues and things like that. And so you feel, quite depressed by that sort of vision. And India is a young country as well, so that was important for us to think about. What we found is that partly for people getting ready for retirement, not already in retirement, as you said, for people getting ready for retirement, one aspect is to really reframe this word retirement, because sometimes it has negative connotations in your mind, to a better word that's actually more positive, which is probably financial freedom rather than retirement. Thinking about financial freedom is a more positive way, whether it's a young generation or an older generation. And financial freedom essentially means that you want to be free from the primary source of your income, which was always the job for people. Now, within that survey, when we looked at professionals, they didn't even consider retirement. They said they're going to continue to work for as long as they can work. Whereas for salaried people, for a large portion of people, they probably don't want to see their boss's face when they go to office. They're depressed about going to their workplace, and they want to hang up their boots as fast as they can. Now, we have to understand that maybe even for an audience like this, we are probably part of 1% of India. Anybody today in India earning more than a 15 lakh income per annum is probably in the top 1%. So the real India is beyond that. I mean, that's where the struggle really is. And in that segment, people plan for retirement only if they have a surplus. So that was the first insight, one of the bigger insights that we had, that people plan for things like retirement only if they have a surplus, because people, when they talk about planning their money and their savings and their investments, tend to want to do that only for happy outcomes. So when it's about their children, when it's about their spouse, when it's about buying a house, when it's about buying a car, going on a vacation, they'll plan for it. When they think about an expected event like retirement, which is a negative connotation, they tend to put that back in its priority. So one is this association to surplus. The second is people who, had a second source of income felt more ready about retirement, which meant that if they had any rental income or an investment income, they felt more ready for retirement than those people who didn't. And one of the other things also that we found was that when we ask people about the financial anxiety around retirement, if they came from large joint families, they were less anxious about retirement. If they came from nuclear families, they were more anxious about retirement. And I think the pandemic has actually exaggerated that, as more people have gone nuclear, at least in the urban centers, and elsewhere as well. So to me, I think when it comes to retirement, India is still struggling in that sense. The large part of India is still struggling. And why it is important is because when you think about all your financial goals, you want your children to study in the best colleges in India or abroad, you want to buy a good home, car, have a great lifestyle, whatever it is. What you realize is that amongst all your financial goals, retirement is the only financial goal for which you don't get a loan. You see, you want children's education, you get a loan for it. You want to buy a house, you get a loan for it. You want to buy a car, you get a loan for it. So if you fall short of some money of those goals, you can get a loan. If you fall short of your money for retirement, you don't get a loan. There are things like reverse mortgage kind of products internationally, not very developed as far as India is concerned. If I look at my parent company, PGIM, which is Prudential of the US, and they do a lot of work around pension and retirement as well, I think the general trend that seems to be happening is actually for discarding this word retirement because it's an old world industrial concept, and getting people to think about the fact that they should be having some secondary income as far as they can stretch it. What I mean by that is that the biggest risk for retirement for anybody is not whether you will have enough of a corpus to last you for some time. The biggest risk in retirement is that you have only one skill that you have done at your job for probably 30 years, and you don't have other skills that you can monetize. And most people who feel more prepared, therefore, for retirement, and the advice that one would give is to say that if it is possible for you to develop more skills, if you're in your 40s and your 50s, which you can monetize as you hang up your boots in your primary job, regardless of whether you earn a small amount from it and not necessarily what you earn from your primary job, that's the best way to take care of your retirement future. And I must end this by saying that more than all of this, from something that you said, the biggest issue is really health. because the highest inflation is related to health and, sort of medical expenses and things like that. So if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and even beyond, I think the key message is that, health is factor number one. The more you can work on that to ensure that you're as physically and mentally healthy, that helps you into retirement to have a good quality of life. Two is that if you feel anxious about the corpus that you might have towards retirement, it's really not the biggest concern. It's a smaller concern. The bigger concern is, do you have skills that you can keep working at and, earning from it? Regardless, you could be a yoga teacher, you could be an instructor, you could be a content writer, whatever it is. But if people in their 40s and 50s can think about it and develop a secondary or tertiary skill, that can be, very, very helpful.
Yeah, it's very interesting, the points that you raised. In fact, most of us forget that ever since 1991, when the liberalization came about, a large body of empirical economic studies are now available, saying that, pre-liberalization India, people were dependent on the insurance for retirement actually was the joint family. And it used to be the transfer of liability. When children grow up, we become dependent on our children, and children would look after us. But now that, and it's a major concern. In fact, development economics have been working on that, and they have been sounding their worries for a very long time now. And is this that in the villages, the joint family system is, breaking down, and as a result, the concern of old age people, and they don't really have skill in that sense that you have been talking about. In the urban sector, we can develop those skills, but in the rural areas, a farmer, for example, if he is old and if he doesn't have the children looking after them or a family looking after them, then it's a major problem. Point number two that you talked about is cultivating skills, two sets of income capabilities. So having said that, it's too late for the people who have already retired, and actually the points that you are making are, of course, very important for the people who are going to retire. Now, what would be your key messages for these people, actually?
So some of, a repetition of a little bit of, what I said. One is to realize that retirement as a financial goal is the only financial goal for which you don't get a loan. So the primary message would be for many of those young and working is to start saving early enough for that one goal. And it's difficult. I mean, it's easy for me to say it. It's very difficult for people to do, because it always comes back to saying that the children are the first priority. So what you will do is first for your children and your spouse and everything else, and then you would do something for retirement. The second part is that, so therefore prioritizing, retirement is important. The second, part of it is, like I said, is to work on multiple skills if it is possible for you to earn whatever little income that you can out of those, secondary skills that you get. Focus on health is the other one, because that is the big detractor. In fact, surveys have found that people losing their health actually get more worried than people who lose a little bit of their investments, actually. Losing health is even worse than doing that. So that happens. And this is not, I think, something unique to India. I mean, if you look at this whole retirement issue all across the world, even in as developed a country as the US, very recently I was listening to some of the data that comes out of my office, and 70% of Americans surveyed say they're not ready for retirement, right? And my feeling is that if I were to think about any self-respecting adult and what are the two things that you should have control on, it would be health and wealth. And they don't teach this in schools. They just don't teach good nutrition or good, basics of money management in schools as much as they should. What happens is you become an adult, you get into working life, you look around, what are your friends doing? Somebody's investing in stocks. Today it might be Bitcoin, today it might be something else. It may not be appropriate for you. And so the best way to deal with this is really to have a finance professional work with you to understand whether you're a retiree already or you are planning for your retirement, to have a finance professional actually work with you to realize what is the corpus that you would need, how can you get to that corpus, and post that, what could be the withdrawal that you would need to do so that you can keep this money for as long as possible. Now, one of the reasons why I talked about maybe an advice to the younger generation to have multiple skills, if possible, is because if you look at some of the data that's coming out of research, right? In 2015, the cover page of the Time magazine had the photograph of a little baby that said that this kid could live up to 142. So, you know, our average ages are going up. Maybe not now in this generation, would still be their 80s, 90s, but look at the number of people who are crossing their 90s and getting into their hundreds. And medical science is progressing almost on a regular basis. So typical retirement advice many a time ends to be that you're working for 30 years, so you save for those 30 years, so you have a corpus which you can use for your retired life of 30 years. But if you're going to live to 90s and hundreds, you have a problem if the money doesn't last. So that's where the secondary skills, that's where the focus on health, starts becoming more important, and that's the focus.
See, in the personal finance field, people, nowadays one gets to hear loads of stuff about behavioral issues, you know. And one point that you mentioned, Ajit, is very important. Knowing to manage one's money. It's good that these days one gets to hear that is going to be part of the school syllabus. You know, personal finance is going to be part of the school syllabus from class 8 onwards.
Yeah.
But the issue is, having said that, and having lived for such a long period of time, even our next generation is part of it. They have yet to come out of those biases that we had. You know, we have passed on those biases to our children who are in their 30s or mid-30s. So, what would be your advice to these people? How do they manage their behavioral issues with the risks that, savings behavior entail? So what would be your take on that?
Well, it's a difficult one because, behavioral issues are great to discuss, but it's innate in people, and so it's very difficult to know. So the first step really becomes awareness. To say that, as long as you're aware that your personal behavior, your personal financial habits has an impact, or discipline in finance has an impact, is an important issue to be sort of aware of. Maybe let me just take a step back and try to put this in the context of the Mahabharata, for instance, and it's about the Mahabharata, not from the Mahabharata, but there is an esoteric meaning to the Mahabharata, for instance, right? They sometimes say that the Mahabharata is inside every individual. It was a great epic and a great story, but it's something that happens inside every individual. And the interpretation of that is to say that Dhritarashtra, for instance, was the blind king. And Dhritarashtra really represents your brain, in the sense that the brain is essentially blind. It only takes decisions depending on whatever sensory information it gets. And the 100 sons of Dhritarashtra, the Kauravas, the villains of the story, are nothing but the 100 different negative biases that we tend to carry on in life. And if you need to defeat these 100 negative biases or villains, you have the 5 Pandavas, which are your 5 senses. Every human being just has 5 senses. And Pandavas represent the 5 senses that you have. Draupadi as a character typically represents purpose, because purpose and passion, in the sense that you can have the 5 brothers, but the person who keeps the 5 brothers together is Draupadi with her purpose and passion to the end of the story, right? So you can't just sharpen your 5 senses and have great 5 senses, you'd also need to have a strong purpose and passion. Krishna, of course, is representative of the conscience, your inner voice that says what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad. The interesting character here is really Karna, because he's sort of the eldest brother of the 5, which means that he's part of you, but he's on the wrong side in the war, and he does get killed. And in this esoteric meaning of the Mahabharata, Karna represents ego, your personal ego, in the sense that what it says is that it is always ego whether it's a personal relationship or a professional relationship or the things that you do, ego that comes in the way and can defeat you. If you're not able to control your ego, if you're not able to suppress your ego, it gets difficult. So the reason I'm sort of painting this different picture from the Mahabharata is to say that it is true that for us as human beings, things that trip us up, even when it comes to our financial journeys, is really our own personal biases. Ego is one big one of them, saying that, listen, I know what I need to do and how I need to do, and sure you will. But to take help from a financial advisor, I would say here a Sarathi in that sense, is probably the biggest advice I would give to anybody thinking about planning money for the future, because you take the emotional bias of it out of it and have a person who can guide you. Of course, it has to be a person that you can trust, who has the experience and competency for it. But if you can do that, I think that's the surest way to sort of do it. And I'm saying this because I have a financial advisor myself. I don't invest myself. I have a financial advisor who plans for the family, and I review everything with him twice a year or thrice a year. And I think I have reduced my financial anxiety 95%. You should always have some financial anxiety. That's good.
Shorn of the allegory that you had mentioned, essentially what you are saying is the fact that like when we are ill, we go and consult a doctor. So go and consult a financial advisor.
Yes.
And but then but there is also that issue, and people are about AIs a lot these days, you know, the creation of portfolios using AIs and all. And but I am getting to see some articles even on the net that AI can do this, AI can do that. In the perspective of this AI coming into the play, what would the role of personal savings investors be like? Because as you said, that behavior is also very important. And like Shoival, for example, he knows almost all of his clients personally. He knows their biases, how do they behave, what their family is like. That helps us a lot. So in that perspective, what would be your take, like the new age technology and the role of individual advisors?
So yes, this is, a question that hangs in a lot of people's mind, that, with the kind of advent of technology, and of course the younger generation adopts technology very well, could that be positive or negative, or what are the pros and cons of something of that sort? And I think that there is no reason why people shouldn't be using technology as long as it eases and, gives them convenience of doing something faster or better. But to get a little bit, well, I won't get technical about it, but just to say that there's one part of when you put your money aside into products for your savings and your investment, there is a utilitarian benefit you get out of it. I do insurance, it protects me. I'm saving and investing, so, I'm creating a corpus for myself. But human beings don't emotionally just connect with the utilitarian benefit. A lot of people do what they do because they want to express themselves in a certain way. There is an emotional and a feeling when they're doing something for their children, when they're doing something for their family, or when they're doing something for themselves. And it's very difficult to imagine that machines can have empathy, which is a very human construct. I mean, machines can get to the best possible technical things that they can do, but to get to the level of empathy, which is what is really required in a relationship when we're thinking about managing money, because it's your emotions and your feelings and your dreams and aspirations that you're expressing, that you need a human being as part of it. Now, to just give you an example, in some of the biggest hospitals in the world, the surgeons are probably getting replaced by robotic surgeries, right? Which can do it more precisely than the surgeon who has studied for God knows how many years and is well known. But in that same hospital, the nurse is not getting replaced by robots, because the nurse's job is a job of empathy. And in financial businesses as well, in terms of especially this relationship between a client and an advisor, there is that empathy and emotions that come to it. That's one part of it. The other part of it, I would say, is that when you have in a human relationship with an advisor, there's many a time that you are co-discovering something Because it's not as if the advisor will say that I know everything about everything. Maybe they know everything about, stocks and bonds and markets, but maybe not about Bitcoin or paintings or real estate. And it's a co-discovery process, and you will keep, having a relationship with a human being who can tell you that, listen, let me find this out for you and come back to you. With a machine, you will never get that. You will always get an answer. So whether that's going to be right or wrong for you, you can never say.
I'm a huge fan of Star Wars, so I was just wondering as you were talking about AI, whether it would be the age of the Sith or it would be the age of the Jedi. But whatever it is, Ajit, what would be your, the big take for us? What would be the takeaway of this session for us? And what would be your last quote? I mean, for this session, of course.
Well, let me put it this way. There's a quote, for instance, that I use in some of the formal presentations that I do with customers and advisors, and it's by a gentleman named F.M. Alexander, who was an Australian actor. He said that people don't make their futures, they make their habits, and their habits make their futures. You can extend it to say people don't make their financial futures, they make their financial habits, and their financial habits make their financial futures, just as an extension. So to me, I think that a lot of us struggle with financial issues because it's a complex issue, and there is enough and more research there to say that the human mind does not like this complexity, so it's going to delegate that to experts that you see on TV, newspapers, wherever else that you want to listen to. And that's all very fine. But to me, I think that the bigger issue is that financial anxiety can never be solved. When we think about saving for, let's say, a vacation, I'm just giving an example, and you're reaching close to the goal and say, hey, you've already met the goal. You'll suddenly say, okay, can we add 2 more countries to the list? Or can I go business class? So human beings by nature, when they reach closer to financial goals, will always move their goalpost, right? So I think that what should be more important is more a mental shift in saying that as long as I'm doing something to reduce my financial anxiety to the best possible way, you are doing better than the average. And I think that having an advisor as part of your journey is probably the best solution for it. And I also want to talk about one other aspect, which is that many of us get caught up in the news and, about market levels, and the Sensex is here and the Nifty is here and it's down 20 and it's up 30 and things like that. And this is the benchmark that, we all, talk about in these equity markets. The real way that an individual should be really thinking about is that if I have something that I am saving and investing for, whether you're a retiree looking at your retirement life or whether you're a young person looking for various financial goals, the time frame of that goal and the return that you really need to reach that goal, which your advisor can tell you, is the only thing to be concerned about. When you start looking at the market levels going up and down, what happens is when the markets are doing very well, we'll jump in, and you're probably jumping in at the peak, and then the next cycle is something that gives you a bad experience. And a lot of retail people, if you look at the data of investing across India or the world, typically jump in when performances are good. When things are going negative, nobody wants to step in, right? And here's the issue. 100 rupees, if it goes down by 50%, if you lose 50% of your 100 rupees, you'll go to 50. But if you now want to go back from 50 to 100, you need 100% return. So 50% return brings you down halfway, but now you need 100% return to go up. And this is the problem that occurs when you're looking at markets all the time and thinking, is it a good time to get in? Is it a good time to get out? Instead of looking at saying that, listen, here's my goal. I need 11% or a 10% or a 12% compounding to get there. And if you can focus on that, and in a technical term, it's called the sequence of return risk, right? You just need to worry about, I need the sequence of return to get to whatever goal I'm planning for. I shouldn't risk that sequence of return. Where does the risk come from? You jump into something that says, looks like
electric vehicles are the next best thing, let's go into this thematic fund, or, let's get into healthcare sector and, just invest in that. Not bad in itself, but the proportions can become very dangerous. So as long as you're focused on what's the time frame, what's the rate of return that somebody can help you compute to say that that's what you need, as long as you've got a diversified portfolio, I think that should be fine. And I'll maybe, while there is so many things to think about, and at a very simple level, I would say this, that whether you are an American or a Chinese or a European or an Indian or whatever, there are only 7 asset classes in which you can make money. There's only 7 asset classes in which you can invest in and make money. The first is equity, stocks. The second is bonds and debentures. The third is gold and precious metals. The fourth is commodities. People invest in commodities. The fifth is currency. Sixth is real estate. And the seventh is something that I would call alternates. Now, alternates is a big basket. Alternates is that basket full of things in which you can actually invest and make returns. But if you want to compare its performance over the last 20 years to see what will happen if interest rates go up and down, will I lose my money, will I gain my money, you will not get that data at all. And where you don't get any of this data to compare it, you can put into alternates. Example, paintings, antiques, Bitcoin, private equity, hedge funds, venture capital. They're all, investments that you can do and you can make money with, but you can't get public data on Google to say, I want to compare the performance of these things over the last 15, 20 years against real estate, against, you won't get that data. That's what's alternates. 80 years ago, equity was an alternate probably, but now you have enough data to compare and find out how it will do for you. So if you have these 7 asset classes, and I'm saying it's a legitimate asset class, Bitcoins and paintings and antiques and watches and whatever. For instance, just as an anecdote, in the last 100 years, the best asset that has given returns for investors is equity. Guess the second one. It's wine. So, people invest in it. We don't have it maybe in India, but internationally we know that we do. So if you can think that there are these 7 asset classes, the trick and the simplest thing is, as long as you can be as diversified as you can in these 7 asset classes, you're good to go. Sometimes people have all their money in real estate, that's a risk. All their money in equities, that's a risk. All their money in the bank, that's a risk. As long as you can spread it out, and again, with the help of a good financial advisor, I think that's the best way to approach managing your money. There is a sequence to managing that money. You do your household budgeting first. Once you know what your expenses and your surpluses are, you first do your insurances for your life and your health. If you have surpluses left over, you then do an emergency fund. 6 months of your expenses put into a bank account is good enough to do it. Then you step into investments. A lot of people just mix up the investment or just get concentrated in something. That's where issues start off. Sorry, long-winded answer.
Yeah. Thank you, Ajit. My only takeaway from this conversation is that where is Saibal? I don't know. Saibal, I will leave my financial worries to you. I will live my life as I used to. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you.